Hey everyone, so it's another week. So I'm going to be giving my thoughts as well as my own interpretation and review on The Killer Inside Me, which was written in 1952, I see. So just to give a broad overview to start off with, I have noticed after reading this book something about crime fiction that I did not notice before. So I think crime fiction really allows us to hold a mirror to society, to kind of tell us a lot about ourselves and force us to see society for what it is, for what it truly is. For example, about people's true identities, how easily those identities and personalities can be hidden. Um, I guess just more of like a bleak overview of life and of society and of people, which I consider myself a realist. So it can be nice to hear, but it can also be a little bit of a letdown, which I can understand. But I think that's what makes it so interesting to read is to see such taboo things represented, something we're not used to seeing all the time, um, represented, which I think is super interesting. But obviously, in The Killer Inside Me, Thompson depicts a moral. He's not morally gray. We like absolutely hate him. He's like completely evil. He's just he's gone. He's like too far gone. So he's not morally gray. Um, he we're used to seeing protagonists that are either morally gray or just completely evil, especially today. We're used to seeing this in TV and movies. Just to name a few examples: American Psycho, Dexter, which I'm currently watching and loving, The Joker, and the Netflix show You, which, you guys are all familiar with that one, or at least a few of these that I mentioned. But back then in the 1950s, the time of noir crime writing, this was definitely not the case, I can see, especially with, the main character being the serial killer, the one that we can't root for this time. So, back in these times, I I suspect that there was something about just the overall fiction genre that was supposed to uphold these high standards and morals of society, um, whereas noir and crime fiction really turn all of those ideas on their heads, which you can definitely see come into play in The Killer Inside Me. Um, and we absolutely see that come into play here, because this is a first person account. We have first person pronouns, we have I, we have like we, and all those kinds of like first person pronouns, to really get us inside the killer's head. Um, so Lou is without a doubt completely wicked and completely unlikable, and we are not supposed to root for him here. That is Thompson's goal, is we're not supposed to root for him, but he has a way of bringing us, the reader, inside of his head, without truly realizing it. Um, at first he comes across as this unintelligent sheriff who has a lot of this like cliche filled speech and like advice that he gives to other people. Um, and he definitely seems like he's putting on a different mask when he's presenting himself to this small town society, the small town of Central City. So he speaks in like aphorisms, which is kind of interesting. And he comes across as like an unintelligent, like very countrified man. But of course, on the other side, his more authentic personality is, the complete opposite, it seems. He is a complete sociopath, emotionless, just chameleon. He's used to switching his personalities in order to manipulate other people and feed off of their emotions. So as a sociopath, he does not feel empathy at all. He is only capable of mirroring other people's feelings and actions, as well as like the way that they speak. So everything to him has a motive, because those kind of feelings aren't truly there within him because he is completely emotionless and cold-hearted. Um, so he is cool and calculated. He's definitely not that cut and paste, two-dimensional noir bad guy. Um, and it makes sense how this 1952 character could be the start of that serial killer protagonist archetype, the one that is so common today, but is still so interesting to see. Um, so he's so calculated that he's a master at putting on all these different faces, all these different facades. Um, and to other people in the small town, he seems quite charismatic. People really like him, but of course, this is completely rehearsed. He is used to putting on a completely different mask, and taking it off when it is necessary, when it is needed. So the way that Thompson writes violence in here is so visceral. It had such an effect on me that I was like, holy moly, how was this written in 1952? I was not expecting to read something so graphic and so brutal from the 1950s. I think that was one of my preconceived notions before getting into this one, was that it wouldn't be as graphic, but it definitely was. So, um, but it's so impactful that it almost seems to infect the reader with that same sickness that Lou says that he has, um, which is so interesting. We definitely feel ourselves being put into his mindset. And what Thompson does through this first person account is really force us to look through his eyes, as undesirable and sickening and gruesome as that may be. That's the goal here, and to, I guess, to mainly to shock us, to get some kind of reaction out of us and get us to see, the different sides of a human, the bad and the good, and whether or not the good will outweigh the bad and the bad will outweigh the good. So in those scenes of graphic violence, Thompson is truly bringing us into the mind of a cold-blooded killer, which is particularly unique, especially of something at this time. Like, that's something that I was not expecting either, is to have that have those first person pronouns. Um, um, but as for, the descriptions of the violence in this text, I could see how the violence could be so graphic and so descriptive that it could almost be a little bit physically repulsive, especially for people who have a really weak stomach, or are like really sensitive to these kinds of things. So, I mean, for those kinds of people, a trigger warning is definitely needed. But as for me, I was fine with it. It was, don't get me wrong, it definitely had an effect on me by the end. I was like, oh my gosh, did I just read that? um, but I mean, the way that Thompson depicts the duality of his character is so fascinating, and I think he did that so well here. And because of the way that he characterizes him, I know that his character is going to be on my mind like forever. Like, I'm going to make connections between Lou and, Joe from You, or Lou and like the Joker, and just having those kinds of characters that are really memorable is really, really important. Um, but, Thompson, he has his character is depicted, or his duality is depicted a lot more, um, or comes out a whole lot more in the very beginning of this book, because we truly see the two sides of him. So the one side that is like dull-witted and boring, the one that he depicts to everyone else, that these small town people seem to really like. And obviously the sociopathic, manipulative, murderous, cold-blooded killer. But obviously we see that this bad side of him definitely overtakes the other side of him because he considers that to be the more authentic side of him. The killer that is inside him just comes out. The sickness that he claims that he has, the sickness, this desire for killing, that is my cat. So if you see her, her name is Roxy. Um, I don't know why I said that, but this like manipulative side of him is hidden in plain sight, which is very fascinating because we like to think that in these small towns, like the one that is depicted here, we like to think that everyone knows everyone. Everyone knows about family drama, personalities, background, past, all that stuff. And we definitely see that in the book, making assumptions about someone's character, and kind of giving them a benefit of a doubt when it comes to the stuff that we don't know about them is bound to fail, basically, and have some kind of effect on a character, on one or more characters. So, for example, Joyce Lakeland is sure that she knows Lou 100% as soon as she meets him. Um, but instead of being completely repulsed by his character, of course, she gives him the benefit of a doubt. She assumes that he's good and that that side of him is who he is. Like what she sees is what she gets, basically. Um, and she's actually really, really drawn to him, which shows how successful he is at putting on those facades. So, that makes sense, especially when we think of people like Ted Bundy, who were depicted as charismatic and polite and even like shy too. So Lou absolutely plays a really good game of cat and mouse with the people of Central City and overall with the reader. So overall, that's it. Bye!